because I didn't.
Even faster.
I can remember doing this. Okay, I promised you guys that I would do a. In my last video, I promised you guys that I would watch the scariest MLP. Promise, my heart is too pure to watch anything that scary. Like I like my brownie. I'm a brownie, but cease. That was just nuts. Like my friend last chance, he can understand it, but me, I cannot. Like I like horror stuff, but MLP is where I cross the line. So instead, I hope you guys will forgive me, but I went for a different one. I've chosen Don't Go to the Old McDonald's Creepypasta. I had to choose something scary, because I would watch anything you guys would suggest. Please don't make them into MLP things. Please. Well, here we go. Not one.
I'm sure many of you have been to the newly remodeled McDonald's, possibly one with a McCafe.
Alex.
But have you ever looked up why they started remodeling the restaurants in the first place? The first McCafe in the States popped up in Chicago in 2001. And that was just the beginning. Now, over the last 20 years, McDonald's has taken to remodeling every single restaurant in America. Most of you might even be asking yourself how long it's been since you stepped into an original McDonald's. Ask anybody who's done some market research and you'll hear something strange. McDonald's loses money in the process. It's a fact. The new furniture isn't pulling new customers, and the McCafes can't sell coffee that cheap and even turn a profit. Look at Starbucks prices and you'll see what I mean. The stakeholders say they wanted a more adult vibe for the restaurant. A classier look for a classier America. It's a wrong answer. Google it right now. What is McDonald's target age group? It's children and teens. It's always been. So then, why did they start all these remodels? Why would one of the largest corporations in America spend over $1 billion on a terrible marketing strategy? Well, that's where things start to get interesting. Let's start with the play places. If you can remember, almost no two play places at McDonald's were identical. Some of them were actually really fun. I know I had a few favorites. Well, some of them were also really dangerous. The first gem I could find was the Carousel Play Place in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, back in the 1980s, and got shut down mere months after opening. Little information was given about why they closed. The lot has been vacant ever since. If you can find the right connections in Lancaster, though, you might be able to read an article that didn't make it to print. Children would play on the merry-go-round in ways they weren't supposed to, you see. They're kids, so of course they would. Well, one day, a few kids managed to crawl underneath the thing, but they never came back out. The whole incident was so heavily guarded by McDonald's PR, you'd be trouble to find even a single person that was even there that afternoon. The only witness anyone could find had this to say. When they went under, a few parents started calling for help, and then something happened to the lights. The carousel kept getting brighter, and then the music was deafening. I ran out of the building when the machine started to smoke, but I looked back through the window to see if the kids were all right. And all the employees were just standing there right behind the registers. They looked like they were still waiting for the customers. Weirder and weirder stories pick up from there through the years. Reports of children sinking into ball pits that should only be a foot deep. Mothers searching play tubes for their kids only to find a lonely pair of shoes. But the play place incidents were only a mere fraction of what had happened. Back in 1996 in Knoxville, Tennessee, there was a businessman of his 40s who went into a McDonald's restroom and remained there for 7 hours. Patrons noted that he refused to leave the furthest back stall. The police were finally called and they managed to break down the door. He was eventually restrained by paramedics as he willingly wouldn't leave the bathroom. As they pulled him out of the stall, he began screaming bloody murder. "Take me back! I want to go back!" But the moment he had exited the restaurant, he passed out. He had no memory of ever going to a McDonald's the day of the incident. The restaurant was shut down before anybody could inspect the stall he had shut himself in. However, anybody who used the restroom that day mentioned hearing several voices whispering things like, "It wasn't him. We have to go back. I saw you smile." And then there was the fry cook somewhere in Vermont back in '99 who walked into the middle of the restaurant and dumped scalding oil on himself without flinching or even saying a word. Several of the customers started to laugh and roll around in the burning oil. The manager had claimed that he didn't remember even hiring the fry cook and that he wasn't on the official paperwork. His name tag didn't even have a name, just numbers written on it. Once again, this McDonald's was closed without a trace. Most of the stories sounded like urban legends to me, but it never failed. Wherever I found a story, McDonald's had been shut down in its wake. Near the late 2000s, the number of cover-ups had become so frequent that McDonald's decided to shut all of them down and completely rebuild. Every single one. But of course, they still missed a few. I needed to see one for myself. I remember going in the old McDonald's as a kid, but that was before the frequency of the accidents. That was when it was still all safe. There was a small town on the way to my parents' home just off the highway. Orozco was its name. Maybe 100 residents. Completely untouched by the outside world, practically forgotten. It was completely pointless to even stop there. They didn't even have a gas station or a rest stop. Not even a sign to let you know that you were close. Well, let's just say I had to sneak my way around some very old building permits to discover that they had one of the few McDonald's that had yet to go through a remodel since the 1970s. How lucky is that? I was surprised that they even had a fast food place, yet they didn't even have a market or a post office. I planned a trip to my parents' place for the weekend, with a stop at Orozco on the way. It was already dark outside since it was the dead of the winter, and I didn't get off of work until 5. I was cold and grumpy about driving at night, but mostly determined. I don't think I ever would have found the place before phone GPS. The turnoff from the highway was just a dirt road with no landmarks or anything. As I pulled into town, none of the houses had lights on, and most of the streetlights were out as well, as though nobody had remembered to change the bulbs in years. This place really was untouched. I'd be surprised if most of the residents hadn't moved out or just simply died off. It definitely had the makings of a ghost town anyways. I had been driving for a while and I was about to lose hope when I finally saw it. The nauseous yellow light of those golden arches illuminating a vacant parking lot in the distance. It buzzed and flickered like a fly zapper running out of batteries. The sign below said, "Eat new Egg McMuffin. We like to saw you smile." Which I assumed was just a lazy teen's handiwork. I pulled into the lot and carelessly parked my car in the center. There was nobody else there anyways. When I stepped out of my car, I felt a squish under my foot. There was a burger covered in mold, with a rancid liquid oozing out. The smell was absolutely vomit-worthy. I jumped out to scrape the contents of the burger from my shoe when I noticed the whole parking lot was covered in trash. There were half-eaten boxes of fries and sun-baked children's toys spilling out of old greased-up McDonald's bags. Everything was mixed in with the dirt and snow like it had been there for months, possibly even years. I hurried across the lot to avoid retching all over the asphalt. As I approached the door, I noticed the windows were caked in dust. Somebody had taped a piece of paper to the door with the word "closed" scribbled across it in red marker. Yet the sign hung from the inside clearly saying "open." Cautiously, I approached the door and I pushed it. An artificial bell hummed an old McDonald's tune that fizzled out on the last few notes as the door creaked open. I looked around the fluorescent lit room and I saw it was void of life. There was nobody sitting at any of the tables and nobody attending the registers. Somebody had left a tray on one of the tables in the back, but there was no sign somebody had been there. The inside of the building was at least a little bit cleaner. The toys on display by the counter were of characters I'd never heard of, likely from before my time. The whole place was covered in faded coats of yellow and red paint, and all of the tables had that classic McDonald's wood finish. The wood looked completely rotten, but slathered in coats of polish as a sad attempt to keep it looking new. All of it had a sort of green hue which contributed to the old lights. The most notable element, though, was a terrible burning plastic smell that stung my nose. I went up to the register. I felt like I shouldn't order anything, but I was hoping maybe I could ask someone a few questions. I waited for a good 15 minutes in silence. I shouted hello with only a muted echo for a response. I'd been to a few McDonald's with bad service in the past, but this was insane. With how dirty the whole place was, I should have expected this much. Just as I was about to turn around and give up, the cash register popped open. It was practically begging me to take a tip for myself. Besides, didn't I deserve a slight reward for wasting my time here? I casually walked over to it and saw at least a dozen 20s stacked high. Looking around to make sure that...
A dozen 20s stacked high? Wow, that'll actually round up to about... A dozen is like 12. And 20s... That's like at least $240. Jeez.
Nobody was watching. I reached in to take a few bills when the thing suddenly snapped closed right on my fingers. The metal dug deep into my flesh, leaving a dark trail of blood down the side of the counter. I yelped in pain. Behind the counter at the other end of the grill was a first aid kit hanging on the wall. The lights were burned out in the kitchen area, but I needed a bandage pronto. I hopped over the table and I made my way to the back. The burning smell was getting stronger as I walked. I noticed the grill was covered in a thick layer of grease, completely unsuitable for cooking. I passed by the frying station and the oil was filled to the top with maggots. I quickened my walk to the first aid, hoping to get patched up and out of there as soon as possible. I was starting to realize that this restaurant definitely was not open for business anymore, and I probably shouldn't have entered it in the first place. I opened up the first aid kit and had to swallow some vomit. The cloud of mold burst out from it in every direction, followed by the same bubbling black ooze that was on the burger outside. I started coughing and waving my hand in the air to clear the mold dust floating around. The same bell that I heard playing that McDonald's tune started up again as I steadied myself. I assumed that it was broken like the rest of the stump. I looked back towards the counter and noticed everything seemed farther away. I must have been disoriented from losing blood and that awful smell. I looked down at my hand to see how bad the wound was, and my eyes widened. There was no wound on my hand at all. I rushed back towards the counter in a panic when something under the stove caught my foot and I fell. In the darkness, my eyes started to adjust and I saw the outline of a body. Somebody was under there. Maybe they were unconscious and needed help. I yanked at the person's arm and a half-decayed body slid out across the floor. They were wearing a McDonald's employee's shirt with a name tag that read numbers. Their mouth was contorted into a sickening grin, but their eyes were screaming. I tried to shout, but no sound would come out like when you're trying to wake up from a nightmare. As I scrambled to get up from the counter, the lights had started to dim and the McDonald's tune was getting louder, the notes fizzling and distorting as they played. Once I had gotten my grip of the counter, I froze. Since entering, I never looked at the side of the restaurant opposite the counter. There was a play place. The glass that separated the main restaurant from the play area had dozens of bloody handprints smearing down towards the floor. The tube slide was caved in with chunks of red liquid spurting out from the tiny hole left at the bottom. There was a row of nooses tied to the monkey bars in the corner, with the employees wearing the same number name tags hanging from them. The tables around the perimeter had skeletons with rotting food left in the trays, some of the food hanging from their mouths.
How can you miss a detail like that? It's like a very big detail to see. Play area. You can look into the play area, see that there's tons of people murdered there, and yet you find a dead body with a number name tag underneath the counter. If I was him, I'll be taking my ass and running out of that hellhole right there. Jeez. Alright, so let's continue this video, and hopefully we can see this weird little guy here. This guy right here. Hopefully we can see this weird Ronald McDonald character pop out of nowhere and kill, and try and kill the guy. That's what I'm predicting. Leave your suggestions down below. Okay? Done commenting. Let's continue this video.
Done in horror, too shocked to move. While the rest of the restaurant went dark, a bulb in the center of the playplace continued to glow like a carnival spotlight. Below it was a massive ball pit, barely able to contain all of its colored plastic balls. It was smoking under the blaring white light, making that awful burning plastic smell. The balls began to rattle and fall off the edge when something inside started shuffling around. I wanted to run away so badly, but my body refused. Then suddenly, the music went dead and the movement stopped. A yellow glove slowly crept upward from the pit below, writhing its fingers as it went. A connected red and white sleeve came after it, slowly alternating colors as they appeared from underneath. The arm continued to reach towards the sky, growing more and more, while its joints popped and cracked like breaking branches. And by the end, that arm had to be at least 6 feet long. It finally reached for the lit light bulb on the ceiling with its gangly gloved fingers and began to twist it loose. I broke into a sprint, jumping over the counter and toppling chairs as I went. That last light went out just as I got to the exit. I ran through the door, breaking the glass in the process. As I rolled into the parking lot, I heard a distant scream, and then something whispered right next to my ear in dead silence. It had that same tinny distortion as a McDonald's tune. Come again. I want to see you smile. I haven't told anybody about what happened that night. There was an article online saying Rosca burned to the ground a few days later. I don't know if it was a cover-up or something else, but I'm never going back to find out. I didn't share this because I want you to get involved, by the way. I shared it to warn you what happens when you do. You can go to a new McDonald's, keep getting your Big Macs, get your McCafe coffee. That's all fine. They did something to the remodels to make them safe. At least for now. But don't ever go back to an old McDonald's. Not even the drive-thru. I've got to stop typing now and get some pain meds. My jaw hurts and the hand that I had snapped in the register has been getting itchy.
So, there you go. That's what we should expect for that. Obviously, there's a Ronald McDonald we just saw. The thing is, 6 feet long arm. Jeez, I think that's as long as President Lincoln. That's still... It's creepy. I gotta give it that. Hell, if I was the guy, I would still stay for the same thing. Sprint. The problem is, I'd probably die. Like, I'm not that fast of a runner. So, that's what I just think. Like, well, that's it. Well, what did you do? Oh, comment down below what I should react to next. I'm just trying to think here. Comment down below, like and subscribe if you want to see more of me reacting to scary stuff or sweet stuff or friendly things that you put down in the comments. I'd look them up and watch them for you guys. Anything you want me to watch, type it down below, and I shall check it out. And I swear I shall watch it. But if it's anything like the MLP, quit moving! Goddamn, fuck that! Ignore him, he's a dork. So if you dare comment down below MLP creepypastas, I shall kill anyone who does that. I probably won't. Well, anyways, comment down below, like and subscribe. Peace out, my demons. Bye! Wait, what?